returning to open session. I will first report out on reportable items from our closed session meeting. In regards to item 4A, the personnel summary was approved and a copy is available at the back of the room. In addition, the board approved the increase in salary of 1.5% and a reduction of 3 workdays for the Assistant Superintendents of Human Resources and Facilities and Curriculum. With respect to items 4B, a settlement with confidential employees was approved, as were the TFT and management at prior meetings for a 1.5% salary increase retroactive to July 1st, 2017. In regards to item 4C1, a confidential settlement for case number 2018-04-0547 was approved for $89,000. In regards to item 4D, a claim for damages was approved for $50,000 with a vote of 4 in favor and 1 against, with Michael Futterman voting against. I'd now like to ask for approval of the agenda, including time limits, with the following exception. We would like to have item 15E removed from the agenda. Can I ask for a motion for the approval of the agenda, including time limits, with the removal of item 15E, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That carried. Now I'd like to ask the public if there's any comment on the consent agenda, but having said that, I first want to note that we'd like to remove item 16I from the consent agenda as well.
I'd also like to remove 16F from the consent agenda and put it on the regular agenda, please.
Okay, great. And I want to clarify 16I will be removed and brought at a later time, so that's not for board consideration. It's going to be removed altogether. But Michael Futterman, you had asked for 16F.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So we'll have 16F removed for board consideration on the regular agenda. Do any other board members request anything else removed, please?
I have a question on 16B. It's the minutes, and
okay.
I asked for a correction on the minutes. Do we need to pull that off, or is that just made?
Yes, please, we'll pull that off and
Okay.
we'll correct it. So 16B will be removed.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other public comment on the consent agenda before we ask for a motion? Seeing none, I ask for the approval, a motion to approve the consent agenda with items 16I not included at all, item 16B and item 16F for the open session discussion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, we will do a roll call.
Ms. Anderson.
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Ford.
Aye.
Mr. Futterman.
Aye.
Ms. Lundgren-Harlander.
Aye. Thank you, Mary. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, our trustee reports. This is a time that the trustees can report out to fellow trustees of anything of pertinence that we think is important for district business, any activities you've attended or anything you've learned you'd like to share with other board members. And maybe we could just start from the end with Laura and move our way down.
It's been pretty quiet since our last board meeting. The only thing I wanted to share is that I've been involved in several phone calls regarding the parcel tax, and we will be talking more about that later on tonight. But the parcel tax committee is moving along, looking at fundraising opportunities, and really right now we're just fine-tuning the messaging. And a lot of that depends on what we do here tonight and in regard to the resolution. And then the only other thing I thought I'd share is that I received an email regarding concern over residential parking near Redwood. Michael, you were in on that too. So 2 of us have been asked to take a look at that. And I know Interim Superintendent Dr. Pitts, I'm not sure how to address you, has been involved in that conversation as well. So.
And I'll report that in my superintendent's.
Okay, perfect. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Then, since you're going to handle the parking, my only news to report is that, in case you didn't know, France won the World Cup of soccer, which is why I'm wearing this hat, Paris Saint-Germain, and I'll spare you the rest, but it was a lot of fun.
Congratulations.
I would just like to remind us all to get it on the calendar for the MCSBA dinner, which of course it's in August and it's something like the 20-something. I'm sorry, but I hope that we will all see you. You will all be able to attend because I think those things are important for all of us to come together, particularly as there are changes now in trustees and leadership in other districts as well. So come to dinner.
I was out at the Board of Supervisors meeting this morning at the Civic Center on a kind of unrelated thing with the West Marin Coalition for Healthy Youth. But there were a couple of young people from the Marin Youth Commission presenting about mental health challenges for kids within the county. What they were talking about was, sort of the absence of wellness type programs in other schools. But what I was really struck with was how well spoken these young people were. And it occurred to me that with all of these programs like Youth Board, Youth Court, the coalitions, all these things that operate outside the schools are, avenues for our young people to express themselves, to learn how to express themselves in ways that schools can't do. And, it takes a village. It takes a village to raise a kid. And, I think we're very fortunate here in Marin to have so many opportunities for our young people outside of the schools to be able to use the skills that they're learning here in a wider arena and build on those skills. It was very impressive listening to these young people today. God knows I couldn't talk like that at age 16.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate that. So we'll move on to the board president report, and after that, the superintendent's report. I, along with Laura, have been involved with some of the parcel tax phone calls, and we'll hear more about that, as she noted. I do want to also let the fellow board members know, I think you realize as board president, I have more of an opportunity and a need to work directly with the superintendent. And so the last couple weeks I've been had the opportunity to work closely with both of our interim superintendents, and I'm very pleased to report that the transition has been seamless and effortless, and I have not seen a transition in management run as smoothly as I have the last 2 weeks. I think we are very fortunate that we have 2 interims that have not only years and years of experience, which is something that goes such a long way. They've been there, done that with just about every issue that we're hitting. But not only their expertise, but the fact that they're both local, they know our county, they understand our community, and so the 2 together have made it a very, very pleasant transition. So just want to report that to you. I know that you get bits and pieces, and I wanted to share that with you. It's been very, very gratifying. So with that, I'll hand it to one of our interim superintendents to provide a report.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you for that welcome. Walt and I have been rolling up our sleeves, learning how to work together, and learning about the amazing staff that you have here in the Tamalpais Union High School District. It's been great to work with Walt and Tara and Wes and Terry and numerous others that I've met. We have had meetings, we've had phone conferences, we've been looking at the issues that are before the district and strategizing and asking each other questions, I think is fair to say. So we hope that you will see the fruits of that in the next, in the meetings coming up, especially in August as we start to look at budget development planning, et cetera. So thank you. Thank you for that. And the next, I would like to report that I heard from a city council person on an agenda item on the Larkspur City Council meeting tomorrow. They are looking at 2 resolutions. One which allows them to put into place specific parking limitations in neighborhoods. The second is to put into place a parking limitation across the street at the Larkspur Marina. And I'm sure this is not news. I know, having spoken with Principal Sondheim, that he has alerted the community to the concerns about students parking in the area across the street, and he's alerted the community to meetings that the Larkspur City Council was having on this issue. I've been asked, I've also spoken with the city manager, Dan Schwartz, and he has asked me to attend tomorrow night and give an update to City Council about all of the things that Redwood High School has in place related to parking. And David Sondheim has made sure that I have an exhaustive list of all the things that they are doing to promote safe, courteous parking in the Larkspur Marina, as well as to give residents the option to contact district administration if they notice a car that's parked beyond the 20 minutes or someone who has not behaved in a manner that we would expect our students to behave in. So I will be going tomorrow to the city council meeting, and we'll see whether or not they get to passing these 2 resolutions. But there is a great deal of concern about the parking issues at Redwood. Obviously, we have growing enrollment. We don't have enough spots for every student to drive a car. And there's concern about being able to have good relationships with our neighbors as well.
Thank you. So the next portion of the agenda is where we typically list board communications. This is a list of any sort of letter or communication we receive from someone that goes to the quorum of the board. And the next board meeting will be a copy of an email. A quorum of the board did receive an email from Ms. Laura Eiffel, and her concern, along with Mimi Willard's, as individual citizens as well as their association with cost, about the proposed resolution for the parcel tax and specifically the term that we had in our draft resolution, or a resolution of 12 years, and there was concern that that was too long. Now we'll move on to the public comments. This is a time for the public to address the board on any item not on the agenda. And I'm going to read this statement for you now. The board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and provides this time for members of the audience to address the board on any school-related matter not on this agenda. The board can take no action at this time. Each speaker is requested to identify themselves prior to addressing the board and will be heard for up to 3 minutes. The presiding officer of the board shall determine, based on time constraints of the board, whether some time less than 3 minutes shall be allocated to individual speakers. I typically would suggest we go 3 minutes, but the board tonight has to recess back to closed session. So, Mary, I'm going to ask that we do this for 2 minutes tonight because of our long agenda. So anyone that would like to address the board, please feel free to stand by the podium, and please introduce yourself. And if you did fill out a yellow card, great. If you didn't, that's okay too. It just sometimes helps with the meeting summary.
1 second.
Yeah, if you could wait one moment, she's getting the timer ready. Thank you.
So you're waiving the board rules to go from 3 minutes to 2 minutes then?
It's not really waiving the rules. We have the option to go less than 2 minutes of the discretion if we have, depending on how many people we have and what our agenda is. And as I said before, we have to go to closed session after this, so I need to make sure we have time.
When would you like me to start?
Are you ready, Mary? Okay, thank you. If you could.
Good evening. I'm Jim Robinson, 25 Ash, Corte Madera Avenue. I have an issue regarding parking not in the city of Larkspur, the town of Corte Madera. We've noticed a proliferation of between 10 and 15 cars on Apache on school days. I inquired about that issue with the principal at Redwood High School. I was advised, as we've already heard from Superintendent Pitts, that there are more cars than spaces. I did note that almost half of them have stickers, the cars that park on Apache. I've already noted as I walk my dog there every morning, several accidents have occurred by cars, by students entering and exit cars. Following my contact with the principal at Redwood High School, I sort of went and took a look myself at the parking lot. And on May 11th at about 9:30, I drove the entire parking lots associated with Larkspur, with the Redwood campus here at Larkspur, and found that there were some 56 spaces empty, primarily in the faculty parking. And I don't know if there was some unique issue going on that day, but maybe there needs to be a look at balancing out the number of spaces between students and faculty parking. I do question whether or not a permit should be issued to a student if there is not a place to park on campus. It would encourage the board to look at this issue not only from a Larkspur perspective but also from the town of Corte perspective, because I assume that this is something that will continue to occur. I've been a resident for 21 years in Corte Madera. I had 2 sons graduate from Redwood High School, so I'm aware of the issues, but I think that we've outgrown our capacity, and this is only an issue that's going to continue to grow as our population increases. So I would hope that the board would give some consideration to this. I would note, too, that even some that have spaces that are within a block and a half of the school are parking on Apache. So I realize that there are people doing different things related to different personal needs, but I think there needs to be an evaluation of the parking needs at the school as they relate to both the town of Corte Madera and the city of Larkspur. And I think we should also maybe evaluate the balance of parking at faculty versus student parking, because I did not see any vacancies, within the student section. And I did not count those refueling stations either. I just looked at empty parking spaces on this side of the school and found some 56 that were vacant that morning of a school day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that input.
James Holmes, Larkspur, class of Redwood 71, incidentally. The combination of turmoil and turnover and secrecy in the TAM District Board, at least depicted in the newspaper, sadly permits, if not compels, the conclusion that there's maybe some concerns regarding oversight by the District Board. Occasional turnover and turmoil is expected, but increasingly it seems to be disturbingly recurrent, if not constant. Even more disturbing than the turnover is the secrecy, especially about turnover at the top. The reasons for turnover at the top should not be subject to the same level of secrecy as rank-and-file personnel actions, because actions involving top management are of much greater public interest and importance. When troubling things happen, then it's not unreasonable to assign responsibility to the people at the top. Candidly, the continuing circumstances of the district under the board's oversight really raises question about the wisdom of continuing to extend additional confidence and additional public funding to the district under its current management. Therefore, in the interest of this district and its public credibility, I would ask the board members respectfully to consider whether the interests of the district might best be served by new membership. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening. So I'm Ken Mayer. I live next to Drake High School on Fern Lane. And I think the introduction that you guys were having as you were speaking is perfect, because the whole reason that I'm here is to raise questions. And it's a format that I can't actually get too much response from, but still the opportunity to come up here as a neighbor, as a parent, and as somebody of the community to ask of you, board, as far as once upon a time, you guys decided to run for this position right in here. And you probably had some thoughts about what you were going to do and how you were going to make changes and how that you were going to be a positive influence on the TAM district. I asked David not too long ago, who owns the schools? Who is truly your audience right there? It's the community that owns the schools. And so therefore, you guys are an elected board to sit at the top of this, which we'll call kind of a hammerhead shark, because there's 5 of you, and then there's a superintendent, and then there's each one of the facilities that has a principal. If I understand correctly, that's the chain of command, that's the management right there. And so I ask you, how do you know what truly happens at each one of these levels? How do you know that you're truly being able to do your job with trying to inspire these people, but not at the same time micromanage them? And so I ask you to look for opportunities as you move forward, because this is a perfect transition right now. We're going to end up with a new superintendent. A new school year is going to start. As far as my understanding, there's not any huge hot spots in the news right now regarding the schools. But, you know, when I turn around and I look at a report that comes from the principal at Sir Francis Drake, I wonder, how do you know how much of this information is correct? And so I look for you guys to look for opportunities to be able to checks and balance, but at the same time inspire your leaders without micromanaging them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Miss, do you have a public comment? I do have a public comment.
So Mary, do you want to get ready? Are you ready? Okay. Thank you.
Hello, Valerie. I'd like to welcome you. My name is Ava Crisanti. I've been working very hard to get the TAM pool re-desegregated. I was shocked to learn that it had been racially segregated in my absence. A couple of things have come up in that time that I wanted to address.
Eve, could you talk a little closer
yes,
to the mic?
Sorry.
Thank you.
I definitely second the gentleman's concerns about transparency. I'm finding that a real problem throughout the county, but especially with this board. I understand that the board has told me that they hired a private law firm to investigate the matter I brought to their attention, which is a little bit like Donald Trump telling me that it would be perfectly fine to have Putin's team come in and investigate on his behalf for the Mueller investigation. It's self-dealing, and it's not okay. I have asked questions about Ann Jaime's comments. You have a social studies teacher for, I think, several decades here named Ann Jaime, and she got up and made statements on October 10, 2017, which are not corroborated by reality, apparently. The board took 6 months to come clean about this. I wasted a lot of my time investigating and trying to find corroboration. I finally had to go to the coroners to prove that no one had, in fact, drowned in the Tam High pool. I put forth 5 questions to the district, which have not been answered. And the district's claim is that they're not answering the questions because Ann Jaime is an individual who came before the board to speak to them. But Ann Jaime is not just any individual. She is your employee, and she was speaking on your behalf in your defense for the segregation, the racial segregation of the Tam High pool. If it please the board, I would request that you allow me to read the 5 questions. It will not take more than a minute.
You're down to the last few seconds of public comment.
I took time off of work to come. I was given 3 minutes.
And at the beginning of the meeting.
Well, then I will be here next week.
Thank you. And before you step away, please, as we've said before, we have done a full investigation, and I'm going to ask the superintendent. I believe last time you tried to meet with Ms. Chrysanthemum, and maybe you can keep trying. It'd be really helpful if you two.
I have been here. I have a phone number. You have all my contact
Great.
information.
If she will continue to try and reach you.
No one has contacted me. Am I mistaken?
Thank you. I'm sure that it'll be.
Okay, but for the
Thank
record.
No, thank you.
No one has contacted me. Thank you. And in fact, Ms. Jaime is
your time
certainly
is up.
invited
we
to
need
explain
to conduct our meeting.
her
Thank
very
you
interesting
very much.
claim.
We need to continue our meeting. Thank you. Now we'll move on to trustee considerations. The first item is report on goals, teaching and learning, equity and access, and student wellness. And I believe we have Wes Cedros here to provide an update on that item. We do that at every meeting. Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm pinch hitting for Tara, who's taking a well-deserved break this week. And what I was asked to update the board on is our chronic absenteeism policy. And so just as some background, in January of this year, the board approved 2 new attendance policies. That's BP and AR 5113.1, chronic absenteeism and truancy. And those replaced former policies that dealt mostly with unexcused absences. The new board-approved policies include chronic absenteeism, tardy, and truancy information. And because I also have problems keeping all of these terms straight, I'll just do a quick kind of definitions. Truant is 3 or more unexcused absences, so the emphasis is on unexcused. A habitual truant is reaching truant status 3 or more times during a school year. A chronic truant is 10% or more of the school days without a valid reason, so those are unexcused absences. And a chronic absentee is 10% or more, missing 10% or more school days regardless of the excuse, whether it's valid or excused or unexcused. The most distinctive difference, the biggest difference, comes with the chronic absenteeism policy. So per the California Board of Education, a student is deemed chronically absent if they're absent for any reason for 10% or more of the school days of days in a school year. The new policy calls for interventions for excess excused and unexcused absences, and specifically early notification to parents or guardians when a student hits 6 absences, either full day or in any one period, either excused or unexcused, and requires a parent-student administrator conference if a student reaches 9 absences, again, excused or unexcused, in one semester. And each semester is approximately 90 days, so that's, that reaches the 10%. The district will be sending a communication to all parents and students at the start of the school year, introducing the new policies and procedures, emphasizing the importance of attendance and explaining the potential impact of poor attendance on student learning and engagement. We are also asking each of our principals to include a similar message in their welcome back bulletin to parents. And the policies and policy language will be included in our updated parent-student handbook and annual notice that goes out. A few additional steps we're exploring are sending monthly attendance updates to all parents to ensure that they're aware of their students' attendance, particularly the cumulative absences, and providing incentives for strong and improved attendance. And those incentives will be developed at the site level. We've found through talking with parents and through our own experiences as parents that oftentimes parents are really unaware of how many classes, class periods cumulatively that their students are missing. When it happens just 1 or 2 times, maybe 1 or 2 times a month, but then by winter break time, their student has accumulated quite a few absences, regardless of whether they're excused or unexcused. And so that is kind of the update on the chronic absenteeism policy. And
Can I ask a question?
yeah, absolutely.
So this issue is addressed and is a point of data in the LCAP?
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the So you've addressed how we're strategizing around implementing the policy. Are there any other strategies being used to address that specific gap? Is there a gap between our groups of students? In other words, does one group of students stand out as being more absent than another?
There are differences between the groups of students, and also what we find is we have a huge issue with excused absences. So if we're really just talking about missing class, we have a lot of students who miss an excessive amount of class for reasons that are excused. It's very difficult to determine if all of those are I'll say valid, or if parents are excusing students when they may not be sick or have a valid reason. But we also have a lot of students who miss school due to chronic health conditions, anxiety, depression, those kinds of things. And so it's a multifaceted approach, trying to get services for those kids as well as addressing the students that are missing school for excuse. And then we do have a number of students who are missing for reasons that are unexcused, be it cutting class or whatever. But there's also, our counselors work very hard, along with our wellness folks and our assistant principals especially, who are kind of all on the front line, to determine if a student is missing class due to family reasons, where maybe they do have a very good reason for missing school, but they need services and support to, or their parent is unable or unwilling to call in excused, as some of our parents do.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Chuck, do you want to go first?
Wes, overall, big picture, with the excused absences, is there a pattern? Is there any pattern to that? More on Mondays and Fridays than Tuesdays?
That's a good question.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday?
I've not broken it down like that, so I can't give you, but I will look. That type of information is
excused
searchable.
first period of the day absences.
Yes, beginning and end of day tend to be higher.
Excused.
Oh no, absences in general. I don't have it broken down.
Laura?
Yeah, I have a question for you, Wes, and that is when a student is approaching that 10% trigger, is there any red flag that pops up that would help the student and their family realize that that student's approaching the 10% mark? Do we track absentee?
Yeah, we still send, the caller, the phone autodialer is still in effect when a student misses class, and then they do get a letter that's automatically generated after, I believe it's 3 absences, and then we have Tara could speak more in depth with this, but we are able to set eSchool up to flag flag for attendance. So when a student has missed a certain amount, regardless of whether it's excused or unexcused, in eSchool. And then I know from my experience as an assistant principal, we would get absence reports about every 2 weeks that we would then go through. And that's a matter of time, having the time available to call all those kids in or call their parents. But we're hoping that we can set that trigger, and then we are, through the policy, mandating that conference with the parent, student, and administrator at the 6 absences. So like their second letter.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, Barbara?
Yeah. I have not heard any reference to the mandated requirements under SARB regulation. Does this district actually hold SARB meetings anymore?
Yeah, the schools do hold SARBs, and we need to work on the effectiveness of those SARB meetings. In my experience, I'll go a little off script, but in my experience working in basic aid districts, SARB has had less teeth than when I worked in LCFF districts, because we are not, we're not paid or not receiving money based on attendance. And so I think structurally, as the districts have grown, there's been less of an emphasis on that. But it is so important for student achievement and the environment to have students there consistently and all time.
The requirements under the SARB law offer us, we already have the people in place with the wellness programs. So
yes,
we have all the people that we need to function adequately in the SARB. And the reason I keep pushing it here, besides the fact that I've been on the board for 15 years, is that the data that's generated is certainly something we can use locally, but certainly all of this plays into state issues, but certainly beyond that, it's about student achievement and students being here, and I know you know that. But I'm a little concerned that we can fall back on, well, we're just basic aid, therefore we don't really need to notice if that kid's not there. And I think we're sending a message by not being active and public about this, that students are getting the idea that it's okay, because this is what I'm hearing, because there's no consequence to it. So I think we do need to look at this and use this process more openly.
Agreed.
So I just want to ask if you have anything to add or direction you want to give, or just report back on this item, or
I think we're actively involved in implementing a new plan, right, Wes?
Yes.
This follows with the LCAP plan that you recently approved, so we could continue to provide updates, and we could also come back with the pattern data fairly easily on absences Friday, Monday.
It's very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think with that, are we ready to go on to the next agenda item? Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Wes. Appreciate the report. Next agenda item is receive and discuss Gandhi Research presentation on parcel tax survey, and the interim superintendent will be providing that presentation with some additional backup from the Gandhi firm. But Valerie, I'll let you go to the podium.
I think I'm going to go to the podium. I have notes on my computer, and I'm going to invite Charles Hester up to speak with me, who's from Gandhi Research. They've just completed the second poll that the district requested to take a look at sort of the temperature of the district and poll for some different rates than perhaps the original resolution that was passed in April called for. So there was a poll that was just recently completed in the past couple of weeks. So, well, not 6 months, a good 4 months after the first poll was done. Could we switch, let's see.
The clip is right underneath there, and you have to turn it on the side. Yeah, right there.
This one. Oh, I see. On. Okay. So the objectives of the poll really didn't change much from the first poll to the second poll. Gauge the public's perception of whether the district is providing a quality education to students, assess potential voter support for parcel tax so that we can continue to provide a quality education, test the influence of more information being given to voters regarding the status of the district, and identify any differences in voter support, perhaps to demographics or other voter behavioral characteristics that might be identifiable in a poll like this. This is just a quick overview of the methodology. We're probably going to be talking a little bit about the margin of error there, so I'll just remind you of the margin of error at plus 3.14. Is that something else in our... Isn't that something else, 3.14444?
Pi.
I know. I was seeing if you knew.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, I can look up here. So we're just going to have a few slides on the key findings. Godby had barely finished this, and I believe that the entire result package is still being worked on. So what we have here is a summary of some of the results that we thought were the most important for you to review. Good news, satisfaction rate, same as was polled in January, so I guess it has been 6 months. A little bit here with the dissatisfied going up in July, which I asked a question about and was told that that is within the margin of error. The difference between the two does not add up to 6.2.
It's about, so let's just say 7%. You have to take into account the margin of error for this poll at the 3%, and then the margin of error for the same question that we asked in the first poll, which was 4%. So anything greater than 7% would be statistically significant.
So it still remains not statistically significant. So the good news there is that the satisfied is the same virtually. These are the results of what are called uninformed support per the parcel tax. So these are just uninformed, meaning this is a question that is asked, and you see the text of question 2 and question 3 on the side of the slide here, and the responses that are gotten from that with no other messages being given about the district. So that's what uninformed means. And you can tell here that at the question 2, the top bar there reflects the yes or probably yes on a $149 increase. And below it, you see the same question asked at a $196 increase. I believe that is a little bit less than what was polled in January.
So if I could, what's your name?
Charles.
Charles.
Yeah.
So one of the things that this board instituted in an effort to be transparent was we're recording and make available to the public copies of all, videos of all of our meetings. So if you could please make sure to speak in the microphone, because that way anybody in the community who wants to learn what we're talking about, can hear you better. And we can hear you better.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay, we're ready to move on. So when given, all this slide says is that when given a positive statement about the district, the percentage of those who say, oh yeah, of course, I'm more likely to vote yes if I hear that, was 56.3%. Those given a negative statement about the district, this is the figure that went up a little bit in between January and now. So much so that there's a little bit of concern here. The positive statement likely to vote yes shows that we haven't quite reached that 67% threshold required to pass with a positive statement. The negative statement, remember that negative, it only takes 33.3% to fail a measure.
How does it compare to item?
Okay, so this is simply the response when a positive statement was given and when a negative statement was given. And then after those positive and negative statements,
Can you say what those
yes.
positive and negative statements were? Probably the board would like to know too.
Do you have a summary of what the positive and negative statements were?
I don't have it with me, but I can bring it, or I can send it to you.
These were summary statements about a negative statement might be, there's a change in the current superintendent resigned, they have budget issues, et cetera. That might be a negative statement. Okay, so when someone is given an example, if we had, for instance, in a campaign, you have people who are pro and you have people who are against. So the idea of positive negative statement is to give, in the survey, give an example of what someone might hear in a negative campaign and what someone might hear in a positive campaign.
But you don't have those.
Mimi,
I do not.
Thank you. Any of your questions you can bring up during public comment. Right
I'm
now
sorry.
we need to get through
I
this.
should be addressing you and not the audience there. So this second part here is what happens when people are given more information. So that's why it's called an informed support for parcel tax. And then you can see that the higher number here on the bottom drops. when given more information about the district in terms of those negative and positive statements. So that was a very brief overview, but one of the things that the board was attempting to get at is, can we withstand asking for a larger increase than the original $149 resolution added on to the current rate? Then the survey reveals a soft basis of voter support for either. As you saw the first slide, the threshold between 149 and 196 was close, uninformed. The negative statement, as I mentioned, has more impact relative to that supermajority that's required to pass a parcel tax. The final test of both rates suggests that the increase shouldn't exceed the $149 per parcel per year, or perhaps that the district should consider a short-term parcel tax. In other words, just going out for an additional amount of $149 per parcel per year for 4 years. So that's a suggestion that came from our people from Gandhi relative to assuring success. Charles, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, that was perfect.
So the new piece here, or the suggestion that perhaps we look at changing there's no rate difference between a short-term parcel tax. There's no difference between the 149 being added to the current rate. It results in the same amount of increased revenue to the district. It's the shorter term acknowledges that we do need this money. We have some variables that might change. And this is what will get us through this enrollment bubble, and perhaps then we could look at, after 4 years, then we have more information regarding the parcel tax there forward.
So I'd like to open it up for any questions or discussion by the board members.
Yeah, what is the basis for the statement that 4 years will get us through the additional costs as a result of this enrollment bubble? Because all of the projections that we have is that not we're going to be declining, we're just going to, at some point we're going to stop growing and we're going to be leveling off. But we're operating at we have an operating deficit substantially every year. So what is the possible explanation for why after 4 years, we would, from a financial point of view, why that makes sense? I don't get it.
Sure. Now, we did not test a 4-year parcel tax at 149, but we do have 2 surveys that tell us that and it's intuitive, the less the parcel tax, the more support that we have for the parcel tax. And with the second ballot test, both at 149 and 196, renewing the existing parcel tax, you're close to the margin of error. You would need to run a flawless campaign. We're moving towards the end of the opportunity for the district to do education and outreach as we move closer to August 10th, the electoral deadline for November 2018. So our thoughts with we're talking with Valerie and between the consultants that are working on the project, that maybe some sort of short-term parcel tax at the rate that voters would support that's closest to the 66.7% threshold that we would need, or that you would need to pass a parcel tax, coinciding with a duration that is close to the current parcel tax, and when that would expire in 2022 would be a prudent way to go in terms of taking care of the district's short-term needs.
Okay, but the district doesn't have short-term. I mean, I understand that we have to make a decision based on financial information, and you're looking at political, you're offering us a political opinion based on polling information, right? But that seems to be, from our perspective, pretty irresponsible, right? I mean, we enter into agreements with our teachers who want to be paid, want to have increases in salary over time, and it's not like they expire in, it's not like they expire in 4 years, right? We have increased pension costs as a result of all the additional hiring we've done due to enrollment growth. That's not going to go away after 4 years. We have enrollment growth is causing all these increase. It just doesn't make sense.
But I don't think we're going to solve it. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the point is that we know that our parcel tax is expiring in 4 years. We know we need that parcel tax, and this is a way to keep that parcel tax intact for the next 4 years and do a supplemental instead, because we know we definitely need that supplemental amount to get us through to the 4 years. We've always known we've had to make cuts, and we've been making cuts. We've been being, much more prudent, continue to work at that, and this is a way to move forward with more surety that we're doing what the community is willing to do and willing to commit to, knowing that we are going to have to, the district, we would need to go out again in 2022 to renew a new parcel tax at that point.
It doesn't necessarily mean the problems go away.
No,
we're talking about threshold for support, and we're talking about getting to a point where this could be something that was passed at the supermajority threshold. So it lines up with the end of the term of the current existing one, which wouldn't necessarily mean that both of those would go away. At that time, you might say, you know what, we still need these, and you'd wrap them into one. But it would be if you were to do that, it would be it could potentially be a no increase over what you've been paying. You see what I'm saying? So it's not necessarily, we're not stating that the problems are going to go away. We're saying that we're going to have more information. It's a likelier pass. And in 4 years, we're going to take a look at the whole chunk again and go out again.
Okay, so one of the questions I asked earlier today, to give you guys this, I told you that I was going to ask tonight is what are we spending? So do you have to conduct this election?
So that the amount of money that we give to the county is shared depending on what's on the ballot. We have approximately 82,000 voters, and we have budgeted currently $180K, estimating that we would be responsible for 160 to up to 240K, depending on the measures on the ballot in November. Thank you, Terry.
Okay, and what about the other costs? What have we
spent? The costs that we have currently spent on Godby is the only other cost to the district is $60K for the 2 surveys.
Okay, that's not the only cost, because we had lawyers help us draft the resolution.
We could go back and look at the time allotted.
I mean, I think these are legitimate costs, right? I'm not criticizing. Right. I'd be really clear. I'm not criticizing the fact that we've incurred these costs. It's necessary to do our due diligence, right? We've decided to submit to the voters in November so that we're being open and transparent, and that at a general election, so everybody has an opportunity to weigh in on it, right? Which is a good thing, and because it's a general election, it's less expensive. So I think I'm not criticizing the fact that we're incurring costs, but the idea that we're going to do it all over again in 4 years, right, and incur all those costs again, needs to be taken into account in whatever decision the board is going to make, because it's got to be close to 300 grand by the time we're done to do all this.
Correct. Right, and I think what the concern is, and I'll open it up to the other board members, is that what we're hearing when I hear poll results, I think of that as a way I'm hearing from the community. I'm hearing from the constituents that we serve what their appetite is, and what I'm hearing is that there is concern. And so in response to that, because it's very clear, even though I know we're doing a very good job with identifying areas for reduction, that we really need this parcel tax to pass to keep the schools the way the community wants our schools to be these special institutions. And so it's really looking at the level of risk, and I think it's something to strongly consider. I want to open it up to Barbara and Laura and Chuck. I mean, Michael and I have had a chance, but I'd like any of you. And
Madam President, could I just add a little bit of clarity to that last question?
Yes, you can, Terry. And Terry, can you identify yourself, please?
Terry Ryland, interim
CBO
business person, whatever I am. The $180,000 that we have budgeted for the election, and that range of 160 to 240, was budgeted regardless of the parcel tax. We have that in the budget because of the board election. So that is not just a parcel tax cost, okay? So it might be more because there's a range of like $2 to $3 per voter based on the number of items you have on the election. So we're adding one, so maybe we go from $2 per voter to $2.75 or something. So there will likely be a difference, but the 180 is already in the budget because we knew we had a board election in the fall. And that's because we're holding it at a general election time. Okay, so as you think about the length of the term, for instance, if you went 4 years, meaning your election would need to be in 22, it'd be like the same kind of cost. But if you wanted to go in 2021 to make sure you had time to deal with what happened at the election, that could be an $800,000 election cost. So think about that on your time. If you have your the cheapest elections are on the generals and the primary elections because we're sharing the cost of an $800,000 county-wide cost of an election with everybody who's got a measure or a candidate on the county ballot. If we're the only game in town, we pay 100% of the cost of the election. And we have like 40% of the parcels. I don't know if we have about 40% of the voters, but we have a big chunk of that. So again, as you're thinking of the period of time, back that up. When would that next election be? And would you go all the way to the end in 22 for the cheap election? So
thank you, Terry.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Barbara, Laura, Chuck, who would like to go first? I take it,
Well,
Chuck.
In addition to the cost, whatever the cost is, there's a huge amount of time and energy that goes in to getting these, things on the ballot, to get a committee together, to go out and campaign, and it's a distraction, from the business of the district, which is educating kids. So, I absolutely do not favor going out in kicking the can down and going out in 4 years. No way, shape, or form. For me, that's a major concern. It is a huge distraction. We should be spending more time managing our money than we are going out asking for money.
And I think the superintendent is doing a good job with that. I think we're doing a very good job managing the money and going out. I don't doubt that at all. So I agree with you there. Barbara or Laura?
Go ahead. This is tough. Chuck, I hear what you're saying about the burnout factor. In reality, if we choose to go for the short-term parcel tax, we're going to be going out again in 2 years, in 2020, to get the whole enchilada. And that is going to be a drain on resources, monetarily and human resources. So I think that's something to consider. On the other hand, after looking at these polling results, and I know I've had a few more hours to look at these stats than you have, but if you go back to the previous slide that shows the percentages, it's worse than what we looked at in July, and in January, sorry. We were still above the 66.7%. This is a drop. And I have full confidence in our campaign committee, but it's a much bigger push. And so if we are hearing from professionals that we should consider perhaps just doing a short term to get that income that we know that we need, it's a lot to think about. And I don't know if we can make that decision tonight. Perhaps we need to think about it a little bit more, weigh the pros and cons of going for 149 plus 293 on the November ballot, or just going for 149 as a supplement and not renewing the big parcel tax, knowing that we would have to go out and do that again in 2 years.
And when you say 2 years, can you clarify that? Because
Yeah,
I understood it would be, I mean, ideally you want to be planning something a year ahead. So I'm not sure why you're saying 2 years we'd be out there working when.
I'm saying 2 years because I'm cognizant of the fact that if our parcel tax expires on June 30th, 2022, we might not want to be doing this in 2021. It's going to cost
Right,
more.
but we haven't made that decision, right? I mean, that's the thing. I just want to, kind of
No.
going along with what Terry was saying, we would look at those costs, and
Yeah.
I don't want it to be assumed that we'll, for sure would be. we're starting at
2020 would be cheaper, and it
Right.
would give us a little bit of leeway in case it didn't pass.
Right.
That's why I'm saying 2 years.
Okay. Barbara?
I'm sorry, I don't like kicking the can down the road.
Right.
We're it, and we have all spent many hours trying to help figure this out. So I'm not enthusiastic about kicking the can down the road to a whole new board, which it could be.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
No,
I
understand what you're saying, and I think one thing that's very clear, we all need time, and right, that we're not going to make a decision tonight. That I think this is something we had talked about, having a meeting in end of July. I don't think it's been set yet or agendized yet, but for a communications workshop, perhaps we could, depending on what you're hearing from the board members, was it July 30th or June 30th? We could talk about having this as an action item potentially on the 30th and do the communications. But I think you're onto something that we definitely need. So now maybe what we need to do is be able to put forth questions that we have so that those questions can be answered and brought to the next board meeting. Because it's the one thing that's clear is we're all not completely comfortable with this.
Could you go back to the, oh, I'm sorry, you didn't
No, I
finish.
just want to say, my concern is about all the folks who are going to be doing all the labor here, who
Right.
have already put in the labor. I'd like to know what they think about these proposals. Is this something?
Are you referring to the parcel tax committee?
Yes.
Laura, can you share that? I was not on the call today.
I can, and I know that one of our co-chairs is in the audience. We did pull our two co-chairs in on the conference today and asked them what they thought about this short-term idea, which really just came to us today. Yeah. And if I heard them correctly, they thought that this, from what they're hearing out in the community, this would be a better sell, a short term.
Okay. That's the kind of information I need. Because if it just came to us today.
Microphone?
Oh, sorry. If it just came to us today, I'd like to hear more after you have had time to work with that committee.
Okay, so we're gonna memorialize these questions so that the superintendent, and this is where it's informational, but anything that you do, so this is where I have to stop myself, and perhaps I'll write the questions down for now, and then we'll divide and conquer and make sure that the board gets any
Another thought is that if we were to now go out, or in November go out for $149 and be successful, how does that impact our chances 2 years down the road of getting, the existing parcel tax renewed?
Okay, I'm writing this down.
Will there be such voter fatigue that we get the 149, but we don't get the existing?
Okay, so I heard that question. I've written that down, Chuck. Did you want to say something?
I was just going to say that The idea is, the suggestion was 4 years. It could be 6.
It could be. We didn't test a duration on this. We were just simply trying to coincide a supplemental parcel tax with the expiration of the current parcel tax. We didn't test 6 years versus 4 years. Certainly, duration has an impact on any tax measure. The longer you ask for it, typically, the lower the support levels for it, or the less you can get in funding. That's just a standard for our industry and the 150 or 200 school districts that we've worked with.
Could you go back to the slide, I guess that was after this slide? Okay, so the third question that you've posed suggests that the district should not exceed 149. So 149 is the number that currently we have a resolution that's been passed.
Yes. Correct.
Right? Okay. Or we consider a short-term parcel tax of 149. So this item, as I understand it, is, well, I think it seems to me, without speaking for any of my colleagues here, 149 seems the smarter, more prudent number based on polling results than what you've now tested, which is 196.
Well, we tested 196 and 149 within the survey, and 196, we were at 56.2% with the final ballot test, and with 149, we were at 60.2. So, and both of these include renewing the existing parcel tax. So the problem is the margin of error, right? So we've got a 3% margin of error, but in order to test this, we split the sample into sample A and sample B. Sample A has a margin of error of 4%, and sample B has a margin of error of 5%, just based on the number of people that saw each question. So we're looking at, roughly 65% with a 5% margin of error as the top within the polling, and again, we didn't run through the bevy of arguments. We tried to do a succinct argument for and a succinct argument against. So this just presents some risk in terms of trying to renew and extend in the same measure. You could be successful with this with an outstanding campaign, and if we're on the upper side of the margin of error, but you could also fail with that. And then, my job is polling, but my job is also risk. What happens if the measure fails? I mean, you're talking about potentially going out in 2020. You'd have to do that again, right? If the measure failed. Or 2022, you would still have to renew the parcel tax, and you would be sans any sort of supplemental money that you might need, whether it's short-term or long-term.
Well, but if it passes, we wouldn't have to go out again in 2022.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If it passes, but we're so close to the margin of error that we're trying to tell you that that if you are going to do this, that we don't recommend the 196 number or any number above 149 if you're going to extend and increase. And if you're just looking at a supplemental parcel tax, because we didn't do that poll, but we're trying to extrapolate information that would give the district as much information as possible in terms of trying to make an informed decision. The 149 at 4 years, again, trying to coincide that as much as we can with the existing parcel tax, seemed to make sense and seemed to be a strategy. Well, it doesn't seem to be a strategy. It's a strategy that other districts have used and been successful with.
Okay, but you didn't ask that question.
We did not ask that question because we did not know where the results were going to fall, within the survey.
This is the second poll, though. You didn't ask that question the first time either.
No, we didn't ask it the first time either because we weren't mandated to do that with the committee that developed the questions. And, in fact, with the consultant in the first poll, we already had a ballot question to test, so we didn't get much input in terms of how that ballot question worked in terms of the tax rates that we tested.
Okay, as currently postured, as I understand it, but this is a discussion item, but we've already approved. We don't need, right now, we are on record and have done what we need to do legally in order to proceed with 149, asking the community to support us by increasing and extending it at the rate of $149, right? We don't have to take any other action for that to happen.
We did not.
Oh, sorry.
No, we don't. But we also, as a board, decided to go out and poll again out of concern and feedback we got from the community to
ask about a higher number.
And then we got information that surprised us in terms of less support, and that less support brought more information to us that we can't ignore. I mean, it's just, that's why we brought it here to discuss.
So
that.
here's my concern. It's July, it's mid-July, it's July 17, right? We have volunteers and a committee and really talented people who are right, who are willing to support and go out and do what we need to do to educate the community, to raise the money that we need to raise in order to deal with the increased costs arising out of significant enrollment growth. And now the suggestion is that we somehow push the can down the road even further before we make that decision, and we're going to hamstrung our ability to have the time available in order to get to run an effective and successful campaign. Well, we don't even have another regular meeting until when?
August 14th.
But we were going to have this as an action item in July 30th. We would still run a campaign. We would still have the supplemental money, and it would, the only difference is that by 2022, we'd be renewing the parcel tax that we have now, along with probably the 149. We might find at that time that we have, as we have more budget numbers, so we don't even need 149. We might decide that we need a little bit more, but it's just giving us time to move forward with our budget cycles, continue to save costs. And again, it just goes back to the new information we got that we didn't anticipate, and it's looking at the relative risk of not having any supplemental, anything supplemental for the next couple years, which would have a much greater impact on our day-to-day instruction for our students, and it's literally just balancing the risk.
So I get it. So Terry, how much money are we going to raise from if we are successful and 149 at the 149? How much additional on an annual basis? How much more money are we going to income? Are we
at 149? It should be about 5.2 million additional.
Okay, and we just passed a budget that's got where we have a line item to cut $6 million out of the budget if we don't pass it.
6 million for next year, and even more for the following.
6 million for next year. Okay, so we do know we need at least this much money. Sure.
Right, and that's what we're proposing. It's the timing that we're saying is different. We're saying we need the money, we need it now. Let's go out and get that now at the best way we can do it. We've heard from the polling. Our experts have suggested that what the community is telling us is that they're more apt to support these actions if we make it for 4 years. And let me just ask you to clarify.
No, the community isn't telling us that because we didn't poll that.
No,
that's
but they
our expert is telling us that, but the community has not said
That's right, Michael, but we don't have time to go directly to the community in the next 2 weeks, and we're extrapolating, and it's the best we got, and this is the data we have, and I'm not willing to take a risk right now. I want to do as close as we can so that we do have the additional funding in place, and so I, like you, I want to still consider it. I want to take more questions from the board to get answers, but it's all relative risk. This is tough. I want to ask.
Yeah. So Michael's right that right now you have a resolution in place that, barring doing nothing, that resolution goes to the county before August 10th to go onto the ballot. You don't need to take action. If you don't do anything tonight, that resolution is still at play. The people who are working on our campaign committee can still go out and formulate, work on the campaign, as though that we are going to have a parcel tax on the ballot in November. So the difference here is just getting a little bit clearer on, if we were to consider this strategy, what are the advantages, and is it enough to mitigate the risk on both ways? Whether if asking for an additional 149 on the current rate together, which is what your current resolution states, we have to really ramp up a very, very vigorous campaign to overcome the messages that we're hearing from the survey, to overcome the misperceptions of instability, of things that have happened in the past couple of months. So what this does, it also, if you did decide to go with more of a supplemental approach, you're giving yourself a year at which point the district will have moved through this transition and stabilized and have, more positive messages and less negative messages. So it's all about whether or not the existing resolution, as is, Michael, will pass.
Okay, so I have a question for the consultant, right? So if we went out for a 4-year parcel tax, all right, we couldn't wait, right? We'd have to go back out again, and probably would have to go back out again no less than 2 years from now, right? Because we couldn't wait till it's going to expire. We'd have to give our chance to go, just like Kentfield, right? They were unsuccessful and they had to go back out again. So we go back out in 2 years after just having asked the community for a $149 supplement. And the number will have been 3% greater than 149, right? But I don't know what our total number is going to be 2 years down the road, right? So what is it, in your experience, what impact is that going to have, the fact that we're going out 2 years later?
In my experience, and it's sometimes with school districts, it's rarely school districts that are doing a parcel tax and another parcel tax. It's usually districts that are doing, let's say, parcel tax and bond. That 2 years is a long time in the voters' minds, and that there wouldn't be any more risk in going in 2020 with two separate measures, one now and one then, or 2022, or whatever the polling tells us that the district should do, and if the board takes that recommendation, there isn't any more risk than putting the measure on the ballot right now at 400 and whatever it is with the 293 plus the 149. In fact, there may be less risk going in 2020 because at that point you're not dealing with an increase, even though it's 2 years from now and there's some recency issues. You're just dealing with an extension of an existing parcel tax as opposed to an increase and an extension of a current parcel tax plus a supplemental amount on top of that, which is what you're looking at right now as one of the options, and the other option being not looking at the existing parcel tax and looking at that in 2 years when it would be a simple, straight increase by whatever duration, the polling tells us might work.
Could I make a suggestion that we take these questions that have been generated and that we also flesh out a few more scenarios, and that we reconvene the conversation with the committee, who this was new to them as well, and maybe have one or two of them join us on the July 30th, as well as someone from Godby again, to put this to rest.
Well, it's going to have to be an action item, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so we'll schedule it as a regular board meeting rather than a workshop.
I would also like, given the polling results that we're just seeing, I would like to take a look at the term, which is now on the resolution is 12 years, and if dropping it to 10 years is something that is palatable to the board and might get us closer to 66.7%, I'd like that to be part of the discussion too.
If we chose to go with the original resolution, but with that one caveat that we would change the term to 10. Okay. All right. I think that's a good point that we should.
And you could bring us some information about your experience in other districts with shortening the term.
What we can do is look at the polling results from the first poll, right?
I think it made no difference, but yeah.
That's my recollection.
Yeah,
I don't
that
have
it
the
really
top
didn't
lines,
matter.
but we tested, I want to say 15 years, 12
12
years, and 9 years.
or 9.
Or 10, and there was no statistical difference
so
in
there's no
duration.
reason not to bring it back to 10 if we chose to stay with that original resolution.
Another point that I'd like to make to the other board members, because I've, like I said, looked at this graph a couple more hours than you have. Take a look at that gray block, that the DK/NA is don't know or no answer. And if we have a great campaign, we could turn those voters into definitely yes or probably yes. So those gray chunks are important.
They are, and not only the gray chunks, but the goal of any campaign is to firm up support, right? You've got the reds there that are definitely no, and those folks are going to vote no no matter what. The people that are probably yes and the people that are probably no haven't fully made up their mind about the parcel tax yet. So, the goal of a campaign would be to solidify that support, to get more of those probably yeses to be definitely yeses, and more of those probably no's to either come to the probably yes side or the definitely yes side through information and then advocacy, which just through the campaign for the advocacy portion.
Could you, Charles, or whoever's got the clicker, if we could look at questions, I want to look at the gray blocks on the before the informed statements. See, those gray blocks are a lower percentage, 9.2% and 8.1%, and they increase after we give the people polled more statements to consider.
Again, it's not statistically significant, but there is a numerical difference there, which suggests, that people are being, I don't want to say manipulated, but information is having an impact on them, right? For some people, they're not changing their minds. For some people, they're, may have been probably no, but now they're DK and A. So the impact of information in whatever measure you whatever measure you decide to go with, if you decide to go with any measure, is going to be an important component of any campaign and getting that vote out, right, and that information out on why the district might need the, whether it's the extension increase or just a potential increase, or excuse me, potential supplemental.
Valerie, you were saying that we need to be able to talk about some other scenarios, and the other scenarios is this doesn't pass, and we're looking at this these gaps to close, and I just. If this doesn't pass, we're still looking at going out, what, again, in 2 years anyway? Is that true? I mean, we have to, right? So,
yes.
So no matter what, I mean, it's not no matter what, but, sorry.
Well, the information that we don't have right now is, we need to look forward and say, what are all the election possibilities, right? And then look at the costs related to that. But if you don't pass this time, we would be looking at, my guess is, the next most appropriate time to have an election. It might not be 2 years, it might be 1 year.
It might be 1 year.
I think this is a lot of new information. We're feeling, we're bumping up against deadlines, and I think that I need to make my little pros and cons checklist and really think about the implications of sticking with the resolution that we have now, or maybe tweaking that resolution to change the term, or have a whole new resolution that is just, a short term, 149 in 4 years. I need some time to think about it, and I'm not comfortable voting on anything tonight.
So I think we've established we're not going to vote on anything. I think what Valerie was commenting on was looking at bringing back to the board scenarios. Any sort of one-way communication individual board members want to have directly with Valerie of an idea of scenario would be, I'm sure, helpful. Okay. But coming back with some concrete, like we talk about pros and cons and costs. Also, I know that, I think it was at the last meeting you discussed that the fiscal advisory group and the part of the budgeting planning that has been ongoing, but you're refining that and looking at if then or what if statements in terms of what passes. So more information. It might mean that we postpone the communication workshop by a week or so, because since this clearly is critical path item. And we'll go from there, but I don't think we're going to be able to solve anything more tonight. We have a lot of information clearly we need to get through.
I just want to add another comment, and that is that I think waiting for 2 weeks and resuming this conversation on July 30th will enable our community members, those who are following this and are paying attention, to have a chance to weigh in and give us more input, which is, as we know, important.
That's a good point. Yep. Do you have anything else to add, Valerie?
No, we can get right to it. Thank you, Charles, very much for coming.
Should I ask for
How are you?
public comment?
Yes.
So I'd like to ask for public comment now on the discussion we just had. And please step to the podium and identify yourself. And Mary, are you ready for the timing of the public comment? I mean, for the comment on the item.
Hello, my name is Joe Price. I'm a parent of a student in Tam High. I see that you guys got some new information tonight. Doesn't seem to me to be a lot of information, because what I heard, and I want to make sure that you hear it, is the shorter the duration of this bond, the more likely it is to pass. Is that correct? Okay.
Parcel tax?
The parcel tax, yeah, not the bond. And I think what's important for you to realize is that the community has seen this group going back and forth and delaying things and having all sorts of turmoil over the last year or so. This is not a good time to push the limit. There is no difference between, I mean, what I heard was basically the $149 is as most as this community is going to pay for. So it seems to me the shorter you make this to get through this turmoil and the reputation and the change that's going on, so that in 2 years or 3 years, knock on wood, the board that's in place then can go back and say, well, that was a mess. We got through it. Trust us now, and let's get back on a long-term footing. But there's nothing to think about except the duration of the bond. If it's 4 years, you'll get it at much more likely chance than if it's 10 years or 15 years.
Thank you.
I don't know what the number should be, but shorter is better, and faster decision is better.
Mimi Willard from Kentfield. I really feel for you.
Mimi, closer to the mic.
Mimi Willard from Kentfield. I really feel for you. There's very tough decisions. I don't know what you should do. I'm concerned that 2 tax measures within a 2 to 4 year time frame is going to be really confusing to people, and sometimes they think they're on top of each other and additive, so that's an issue. On the other hand, you don't want to roll the dice and get nothing. So I leave that to you. One bit of input, I think if you think of going forward with your existing resolution, 12 years is too long. Even if the polling suggested before that it might be okay. At the Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers, our view, and I think I think this represents the community, is that every tax should have a sunset date and one that's tied to the project it funds. And you don't even know what students there will be 12 years from now. They're still in diapers. So I think a realistic time frame would be a good idea. As far as other things, I think that, and I sincerely apologize for speaking out of turn during the presentation. I was hoping to prompt somebody to come forward and read what the questions were. I think you really need to know the details, because they will inform you about where you have some levers to maybe get this thing over the hurdle if you do Y and you don't do Z. I also think that visibility to a permanent superintendent is probably a good idea, though I understand that our interim ones are like knocking the cover off the ball, but that might also resolve some community concerns. I don't think the problem is the board. I think it's good that you're moving a transition in the superintendent, and I do think it's a good idea to use the next couple of weeks to get whatever community weigh in and participation in your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi, Karen Lobica. Thank you to Joe and Mimi. Your comments are actually very much in line with what I feel. So this number was presented, this idea was presented to me a few hours ago. So
and you're one of the co-chairs
I'm one of the
co-chairs
for the
Parcel
Tax Campaign. along with Dana Steele. So, Michael, I also totally feel where you're coming from, and the idea of kicking the can down the road is, really unsettling to me as well. I'm terrified of what will happen if this doesn't pass. I think we all are. Of the significant, dreadful cuts we will have to make that affect our students and our staff. I think if we can do the 149 for 4 years, is it a Band-Aid? Well, it's a cast. It's going to help get us through these really hard times. And I think we can get it passed with that kind of terms. I mean, with a 4-year time frame, $149 is a palatable number. We have to be incredibly good at educating our community so that they don't think, excuse me, in 4 years that we've hoodwinked them. We need to explain to them that this is an additive tax. It's going to be added onto the 293. And in 4 years from now, when we revisit whether we're renewing the combination of existing and this additive, we can say very honestly, we were very upfront, very transparent about what we were asking for. Valerie said it beautifully as well. This gives us a chance to get a lot of things tidied up. Getting a new superintendent on board. We've got at least one possible board vacancy, so getting the board settled and rocking and rolling, working with a new superintendent, making some budget cuts that are substantive and important. Getting all of those things in line will really help us sell a better story in perhaps 4 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other public comments on this item? Okay, I think we have our direction. Do you have any questions,
Thank
Valerie?
you. No.
I think we're
Please
set.
send me questions if you have them.
Right. So the next item is approved school calendar for 2020-2021.
This is just applying the same format as you saw in 2018 and 2019 to 2020-21.
Any comments, questions about the calendar? Can I call on you after I see if the board? Oh, I think we can allow that this time. Why don't you come to the podium? Thank you.
I'm Corey DeMars, and I'm the president of the TAM Federation of Teachers and a counselor at San Andreas High School. And this whole discussion reminds me of some of the students that I work with. I work with a lot of students who wonder where their next meal is going to come from, or where they may sleep that night, or if a friend is going to be okay. Their life is in turmoil, and each day they wonder how it's going to end that night and how it's going to be the next morning when they get up. And although this is not nearly as dire as the lives of some of our students, there is a parallel. Because often it's not just not knowing, or it's not that you're hungry or that you didn't have a good place to sleep at night that takes the biggest toll on you. It's the wondering. It's the ambiguity. It's the not knowing when life is going to settle down and the ground is going to get more solid. It takes a terrible toll on our kids, on our families, on anyone who's in that situation. And although we talk about the impact this will have on the community and the impact this has on the budget, I want to talk about the impact this is having on teachers, on students, on families in a district where they're constantly wondering if this is going to be fixed, if they're going to be working in a district where they don't have to worry about whether they're going to make a decent living wage or be able to afford the next item on their list of things to buy. I would urge the board to look for a way to reach solvency in this district as soon as possible. And and relieve people of the stress associated with wondering when this is all going to work and when is this all going to be worked out. They come every day to do their jobs, students and staff, and they leave every day wondering, is the district sound or not? And I think that's reason enough right there to look really hard at a way to fix this as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Corey. Appreciate your comment. So do we have any questions or comment about the calendar before we approve the calendar? Any public comment on the calendar? Okay, I'd like to ask if I could entertain someone could entertain a motion to approve the school calendar for 2020-2021.
I move to approve the school calendar for 2020-2021.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. So now we'll take the items that were on the consent agenda for consideration, and we'll start with item 16B. Laura Anderson, I think you had a comment on the meeting minutes.
Yes, these are the minutes from June 26th, and I noted that under item 5E, the reporting of the voting was inaccurate, that Michael Futterman abstained. It was not a unanimous vote.
So noted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I missed that.
Yeah.
Teamwork.
Okay, I think the next item is, Michael, what you asked to be pulled, 16F?
Do we need to approve? We need to approve the minutes, right?
Oh, I assumed that she would bring them back, that she would make that correction and bring them back. Oh, okay, I didn't realize that. Okay, so with that correction, can I get a motion to approve that agenda item, please?
I move to approve the minutes from June 26th with the amended vote from item 5E.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so now we have item 16F.
So just by way of introduction on this item, these open purchase orders are, what you see in front of you are typically the ones that we need to begin expenses on right away in order to set up for the beginning of the school year, particularly with maintenance, operations, and facilities. These are items that have already been budgeted. So these purchase orders merely reflect what are in the approved budget. Each year, our business office will look to justify those things. Have you spent this amount? Have you not spent this amount? Did you overspend this amount? And the budget is developed based on this. So first, number one, these are purchase orders that have been opened based on the amount that the departments and the persons responsible for spending the money have said they need this amount. Given that, we've also discussed, Lars and I and Tara and Terry have discussed that an open purchase order isn't necessarily an approval to go out and spend the entire amount. An open purchase order allows you to make purchases as you need to make those purchases with an end, you know, not the not to exceed amount. One of the things that we would like to do is go through those budgets and say, you know, we'd really like you to tighten your belt to the tune of maybe 5% and see what happens. Do you think you can do that? So Walt and I have asked Lars and the team to please start looking at budgets from that lens, that this is the time that we have to say, even though we have budgeted this, do we have to spend this much money on groceries this month? So we've asked that begin to happen, so that these aren't necessarily automatic. We're not automatically going to spend this amount on these items. There are always some items that tend to exceed, however. And that's when we have to do budget revisions.
And per Dr. Pitt's direction, we're doing that, beginning to do that. There are some that are beyond our control. As an example, rate hikes for garbage service and so forth. We're obligated to, to pay what when the bill shows up, we're obligated to pay that. But we will, item by item, go through every one. But I really want to reiterate what Dr. Pitts said, is that an open PO, as an example, for $10,000 does not necessarily mean you spend $10,000. It gives you the freedom of movement in the course of your work year to purchase what you need.
So for instance, the question that came up about student planners, there's an item in here about student planners. It's a natural question, have we moved beyond the need for a hard copy planner? That's something that can be looked at when the principals come back, and there's either a justification for that, or that's probably something we can live without this year.
So I was the one who sent questions about this, right? And I asked that it be removed from the calendar. I find it in our budget, given our current budget situation, really, really problematic. I mean, you can pick out. I mean, there's just, right, you can pick out line items. You just pick out line items 3 through 6. It's just, right, there's 58 grand for supplies, open purchase orders for maintenance supplies without any specification other than Home Depot or Amazon or whatever. And it appears, those kinds of things appear throughout this. So so I'd like you to be able to say to the people who report to you that you've been given a directive by the board, so that it's not just coming from you. You can blame us, right? Of the need to reduce spending on what are probably not fixed cost items, right, by a certain percentage. So, Valerie, you said 85%. Is that?
I said 5%.
5%. Okay, so.
And perhaps more in different areas.
Yeah, I was going to say that might vary up or down a bit. So I will go forward with whatever directive I'm given. We're all in this together, so it doesn't necessarily need to be a board directive. I work for the superintendent, and she tells me to do this, I'll do it. And I'm fine to take the heat that comes with that.
This is not the first time. Sorry, I'll finish after this. This is not. I don't know that we need a motion, right? But if we get some kind of sense of the board that, look, the board wants you to, you need to reduce with respect to these items that are, all these open items, right? Open purchase orders. You need to reduce those by between 5 and 10%, sort of overall. Yeah. I understand that not each item will be that way. I just want to say that we've had this discussion in the past.
Yeah, we have.
Right. This is not the first time, and I frankly don't think it's fair to ask the board to approve a lot of these kinds of things. I mean, we're just going to approve 10 grand to spend at Amazon, 20 grand to spend at Home Depot, $18,000 to spend at Grainger. I have no idea what Grainger is, right? All it says is supply.
It's a farm supply company. It's grounds.
And I want to clarify, I want to add something, build upon what Michael was saying. When we've had this discussion way back with Mr. Krancer, and it goes back to the philosophy that you can do it either way. You can have a budget, and some employees know that if they don't spend the entire budget, it's going to be taken away the next year. It's going to get ratcheted down. So the feedback we got at that point from Mr. Krancer was, this district prefers to take the approach of having a budget. You have a purchase order that reflects that budget. And if the employees know that it doesn't mean it's going down, then they do tend to be more prudent. That was just a philosophical approach. And I'm wondering if you could come back with not just what Michael is suggesting, that the board has reached consensus and asking everyone to cut by 5% or strive to, but come back with interim controls of how do you monitor what somebody really spends per year on their budget, so that if someone can cut by 50%, they can do so. I mean, I think what Michael's saying is true. I think people look at it as that's their credit card. They've got 50 grand they get to spend. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they don't look at it that way. I
think that there's a couple of concepts that are perhaps parallel, but they aren't exactly the same. So the budgets were approved, and we can cut budgets or we can increase budgets, but the budget, our entire district budget is just a compilation of everybody's requests, right? And so the concept of an open PO versus a specific PO, it may be that for each of the last 3 years, we've spent, $9,800 at Amazon on 1,000 different things. And so we could do 1,000 purchase. You have to have the purchase order before you order it. So if you're going to do a bunch of little stuff over 12 months with one vendor, all of these are budgeted, right? But it's expedient. It's not changing their budget. It's not, but they're kind of based on history. So, but we have actually a problem in this district on not doing purchase orders in advance. So this is a big improvement over everybody going out and buying their $1,009 items and coming back and asking for us for a check. At least here we have a purchase order to tag it all against. So it's more of a business office process that reflects implementing the board's budget. If we want to go in and do budget cuts, I think that's separate and apart from open PO versus unique POs all year long.
I think that's a false choice. I don't think it needs to be one or the other, right? I get that, right? But this doesn't even say, for example, how long these funds are for, right? So item 24, it says $120,000 open PO, custodial supplies, district-wide, right? That's all that it says. That could be for, I have no idea. That could be for a month. That could be for 3 months. That could be for 12 months. I have no idea. Plus, right? So, but it's just not fair to ask the board to approve 120 grand with only that information. I don't think it is. So it doesn't have to be, I don't want to come back and approve, $3.65 for paper clips, right?
Right.
Right. But we have significant budget issues, and so we're asking you, who have the expertise and are closer to it than we are, is what can we do to help cut some of the spending associated with that? Because once we approve 120 grand on item line 24 for custodial supplies, right, from the board level, we're done. We've got what's our mechanism?
You wouldn't have oversight.
No, we wouldn't.
At that point. One of the things that Valerie and I talked about today as an example, and I'm sure Terry, we haven't talked, Terry's been on vacation. In my former life, in my other stops along the road in my career, I always had cutoff dates for POs. As a principal, I knew that pick the date, but typically it was March 1st, March 15th. POs were done. So in terms of your point of, I don't even know how long these things are good for, one of the things that we will institute is we're going to close POs on a specific date based on recommendations from the business office this year. And so the board will have a finite date to a PO.
So the other question I have was just related to that. And I have no specific information, right? But let's just posit for this number 24. It's 120 grand. Right? Employee X goes out and spends 120 grand on cleaning supplies. Right? I go down to the Home Depot and I buy 120 grand worth of supplies, and that's going to be good for however long it's going to be good for. So we have all this stuff is being stored in wherever it's going to be stored at our various sites. So what kind of issues do we have with regard to what the retail industry that euphemistically calls shrinkage? Right? If we're gonna stack like paint cans right from here to the ceiling in August, what's the likelihood that maybe some of those paint cans are going to disappear and be used are going to be used on things that have nothing to do with the district, as opposed to...
But again, with an open PO, the concept is you wouldn't do that. Because quite frankly, we don't have a place to put that stack of paint cans. So we buy periodically in a given quarter.
Process. Yeah, exactly. So, it's a process.
Yeah, it allows us to say, the custodians will fill out an order in the month of September. I need 5 cases of toilet paper and 6 boxes of this or that, and then through our warehouse we order, we purchase, and it gets delivered. We don't store a lot of items because we don't have space to store it. I don't disagree. If you have a warehouse full of stuff disappears.
Right, but this is ordering that occurs on any given day throughout the year. The POs are valid for the entire year unless there's action taken to shorten them. But it's not like, oh, hey, here's our 10,000, let's go do it. We know that over the course of 10 months, we spend 10,000 on this, and we may buy 2,000 up front as kids show up, and then there's 1,000 a month that gets dropped at 5 different school sites, and there's no storage.
So I think we're talking a lot about process here, and the important thing
Right.
is we have to make sure that we have a process in place that can control, and I think it would be an interesting conversation, interesting presentation as we start looking at our budget deficit reduction plan to talk about these are the processes we have in place to control. Is this the first time you've seen this way?
No.
No,
every
Leslie
year.
said we had it,
Every July.
We've had this discussion before, and it
Okay,
keeps coming back.
because there are other board policies within business that sometimes, and Terry, you've seen many of these too, address the purchase orders that actually come to the board. Okay, so requests over a certain amount have to come to the board for approval. But many of these things you see in vendors, you see in warrants, you see after they've been paid. So is it going to be you see them before and after they've been paid? You don't need to see all these.
Well, and I get and another thing too. You were talking about the 120,000. I have a feeling, and this might be helpful. And I don't know that we want to do the printing for like all of these lines, but I can send to you. I'll go back and look because it could be that there are 10 different budget codes on that $120,000, and it's the custodian at each of 5 sites and the budget secretary at each of 5 sites that are, that have, there's 10 unique budgets all to that vendor, so it's much easier to do, right? One purchase order. So there is a lot more information on the purchase order that might be helpful, but it would show exactly, where that payment is.
I think that.
I'm sorry. I would recommend though that gets sent to me.
To Lars.
And and if it pertains to TAR, because for instance, I don't want to bury the board with that.
All the object codes.
When Valerie asked me today, hey, listen, let's look at 5% across the board where feasible, or more if feasible. The first thing I said is I need to get with Terry and get a spending history, because I don't know if $120,000 is reasonable or not.
That might be half of what we spent on that.
I don't know what we spent the last 3 years. I have no idea. So, the first thing to do is secure a spending history. As you say, look at those budget lines to see if it's one vendor or 27 vendors, and then determine how you can reduce.
And like, for instance, 25% of the dollars on this whole list is one item for $461,760. Well, I'll tell you what, I can't cut 1% of that, because that's based on an invoice from the county for insurance, right? So
You note that's not the one that we've been talking about.
Oh, exactly. No, I know.
Right, there's $2 million worth of
That's
stuff.
an easy one to understand.
Exactly. Right.
I'd like to throw in a point here. Having been on the other end of open POs, they're absolutely necessary, because what hasn't been mentioned is that the PO process itself is slow. So you need some $50, you're a teacher, a custodian, whatever, and you need some $50 item now. To have to go through a PO, it may take you a couple of weeks. It really, it's just incredible. It's incredibly slow. So that when you have an open PO, you can, this stuff can just be ordered. So from that perspective, it's necessary. The POs are always within, the budget. So if you have 100, I'm like a coal supply company, for custodial supplies, that 120,000 is within whatever we budgeted for custodial supplies. If whatever is budgeted for custodial supplies, if we get up to that number, somebody puts the brakes on and says, you can't spend that.
And
It's not in the budget. It's not in the budget.
So it sounds like,
so
echoing what Valerie said, this really comes down to process, project controls, making sure that, the board clearly is under a lot of pressure now, as we all are. We want to solve these issues. It sounds like you're working on it, and I think it would be helpful for us if you came back and described basically your cost controls and your checks and balances of what you do. Normally we wouldn't ask that, we would assume it's being done, but right now we're all feeling that we want to do our due diligence and hear more from you of what you're doing to manage these. We know that the PO is a reflection of the budget that we approve, but we also are concerned about all the things every board member has said.
Yeah,
It's about saving in this current year so that
Yeah.
the impact
So that
in
we
the
come
out
in
years
under
is not
budget.
as much.
Yeah, we want to come in under budget.
No,
And-
absolutely.
And so how we monitor that, make sure people they should not be going out and spending money that's not in a PO
And every
to
time there's
begin
a
with.
purchase order, it encumbers or
And I
sets
fully
aside,
understand,
right?
I
So
fully
there's-
understand the purchase order
This is using
process.
up budget.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that this is not a new thing. We see open purchase orders every year.
Right.
I've had the same jaw-dropping experience when I see $2 million purchase order lists. So this is not new, but I think we are all hypersensitive to what's going on and want to make sure that the community out there is aware that this is not a blank check, that we are
Right.
we are holding people accountable for whatever they're asking money for.
A little bit of history here, too, that, 20-something years ago, I can't remember how long ago, when Bill Levinson was here, we had what seems now like a minor budget crisis, where, we were spending $1.4 million a year more than administration had thought we were spending. Bill went around and, in groups talked to every single district employee and said, let's just not spend as much money. Think about how badly you need stuff and, make a decision. Significant amounts of money were saved just by, hundreds of, individuals making, deciding maybe I don't need that for my classroom. Maybe we don't need, whatever it is, to fix the bathroom stall. And it worked. They didn't have to lay a bunch of people off to save the $1.4 million. So I think, a lot of talking to district staff will save a lot of money. We're in a budget crisis, for God's sakes, spend only what you really, really need to spend.
So two things. So what you just said echoes what Michael said. We, as a board, can give direction, more official direction to Valerie and the superintendents to carry on to the team. I think that's what you were saying early on. We could do something more formal so they know it's coming from the board. But do you all agree that it would give us a better level of comfort just to hear them at some point describe to us what some of these processes are, so we just understand the due diligence a little bit more as a separate task for them, even though or no?
I think that's okay. What I really want to hear, yes, to the extent that they feel like it will help to explain, but what I really want to hear is sort of, you've listened to the discussion. What I really like to hear is, what are you doing to help reduce spending in these areas that we've talked about? And, what are we accomplishing? What are you doing? And is it working? And what can we sort of expect? Mm-hmm. Right? I want a report back from staff based on the collective interest of the board to spend less.
And what I asked Valerie this morning when we had this conversation is that, give me a number, I'll meet with the appropriate directors, and we'll cut to that number, because quite frankly, when I meet with David O'Connor, I don't know if we can cut, if he says we can't cut a penny from this $120,000 allocation number 24, but at number 23, yes, we can easily cut 12%. I think we need to talk to people who actually are doing the work to tell us where we can make the cuts and where we're not able to.
Question.
And that's based, too, on spending history. We'll have a record of it.
The word spending comes in here, and you referred, Valerie, to spending plan. Is that what we're asking for, a spending plan? Is that what
Your
this
spending
is really
plan is the
culminating?
budget. Your spending plan is, I think Chuck put it nicely. We need to spend less this year.
Yeah, period.
Than even what you have in the budget, because
Yes.
we're faced with, with the 3 years. 3 years and
Which is cutting the budget. It's not cutting POs, but it's actually going in and taking the money out of a specific budget,
So we come
so
in
it doesn't
under
end up
budget.
on a PO and get spent.
Yeah, we come in under budget. That's our goal.
So should we come up with a number?
I think it was 5%, right? Is that what you
Well,
suggested?
I like the
as a
way it
start?
was suggested earlier. Let's just look at anything between 5 and 10% as a goal, understanding that there are some of these areas that we can't cut, and some of them that I imagine will go up, like Mill Valley refuse.
And frankly, when we did this budget process, the board had identified some specific areas, but what the district has done in the past is we send out requests to all the sites, and it isn't, here's what you spent last year, or here's last year's budget, and here's a lesser number, tell me where you want to put it. The way this district does the budget is basically, what do you want in your budget next year? So I would think we could find stuff, because there isn't a procedural filter, there isn't that kind of guidelines.
That's what we're working on tightening up.
Concerning to hear.
There are protocols and there
This
are
is not-
procedures.
yeah,
we just
right.
need to make sure that we're implementing and monitoring those. That's it.
But that
so
gives
we
me
will
hope. That gives me-
spend
yeah.
less.
There's stuff
We
in there.
will ask managers to please look at budgets and reduce 5 to 10% where appropriate, and bring you back the impact of that.
Before we move off of this, I too sent questions on this item, and there are two items, number 50 and number 56, that have nothing to do with purchase orders that I had questions on. One, item 50 is Lori Parrish's.
The agreement is in place until she turns 65.
And that was my question. How long do we?
Sorry, I forgot that question, to answer that question.
That's okay. It's been a busy day. So what's the answer?
The agreement that was reached between the district and Ms. Parrish is that the district will carry her on her full medical coverage until she reaches age 65, when she's eligible for Medicare.
Okay.
I don't know how old she is today.
No, and we're not going to ask that question, but $16,000 a year, that jumped out. And then item 56 is the auto shop reconfiguration. Which class, what is that looking like?
We taught math in that space this year when auto shop wasn't in session. So we've made some minor improvements to the classroom environment there.
Okay.
I don't know specifically which class. I know last year they taught math in that during the series auto shop was on.
I've been getting stuff on my
Okay, so we're teaching math class in the auto shop
We are.
building.
And one of the things that allowed us to do is not purchase or lease a portable at Tam High this summer. We're making use of every available space we can.
Okay. Thank you.
So in addition, I guess I have a question, but to continue on and be able to continue doing business, I assume you need us to approve this list of purchase orders.
School, ready or not, they're all coming
Yeah.
on August 23rd.
Okay. So knowing that we've asked for this additional information and additional work on controls and cost-cutting measures so that these purchase orders aren't fully utilized, would anyone like to entertain a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, this is a roll call vote, right? Because it
No.
was on, no, okay, don't mind me. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. So now we'll recess to closed session.
Leslie, can I just say one thing? Sorry. I just
Yeah.
want to, I know there aren't that many people left, but I just wanted just a word of support for Ann. Thank you for all that you do for us. And
Yeah,
we
thank you, Ann.
appreciate your contributions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, dear.
So let's recess to finish closed session before we adjourn the meeting.